Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Straight Shootin LJA, the G-Man and Jazzy Fizzle proudly, usually, bring to you a Monday night footballing fix. But this is the beginning of a new era. This is getting into the deep, dark, seedy, not the seedy underbelly. We're getting into behind the scenes of football. But this is the first in the series that we call Pitch Talk Meets. And sitting beside me is the producer and director of QPR, Queen's Park Rangers, the 4-year plan. And he's also the company director of AdHoc Films as well. Sir, can you introduce yourself? And how are you today as well?
I'm very good today, thanks. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, as you say, I'm the producer director of the 4-year plan that was made by my company AdHoc Films, of which also I'm a company director. So yeah, I mean, that's probably the long and the short of it at this point.
The beginning.
It's a good place to start.
Always. Usually we kind of start at the end and kind of work our way back.
Let's do it the other way, yeah.
But now it's the beginning. How did you get into filmmaking?
Generally,
yeah.
Well, I got into television, to be honest. Probably like most people. Just explored it as a sort of passion, you know, got into doing work experience, was happy doing runners' jobs, you know, unpaid work on weekends, whatever I could do. And off the back of that, you know, obviously you try and impress people within a company and get offered, you know, a small sort of junior role, and then from there on in, you know, you just try and build up and up and up, I guess. But you know, it was never like this is my career path plotted out. I think it was always I just enjoyed what I was doing in the moment.
But how young did you start?
21 after university. So when I was at university, I did the odd bit of work experience as well. But obviously, you've got the safety net of going back to your studies. Whereas when you finish university, you're out in the wide world, and you know, you have to try and make a living. You have to try and make a career out of it. So that's when I would say, you know, it started in earnest.
What did you study at uni? Did you study something kind of filming related, or?
Yeah, I did a media course, but at that time, and probably now, they're a bit 10 a penny. I didn't do great at school. I knew I wanted to do media, and I thought that probably going to university gave me a little bit more time to really understand what I wanted to do, but you know, it wasn't part of the plan necessarily to go to university. But it helped me in other areas to develop, maybe. But I don't think that filmmaking or television, as it was that I initially did, are necessarily driven by a university degree, you know, or that sort of thing. It's more vocational, really. Yeah.
No, I definitely agree with that. I mean, obviously being me and also the G-Man, one of the other Pitch Talk co-hosts, both did a degree in media tech, so there's sort of similarity there. So.
Doesn't count for anything, does it?
I mean, it does help. It does help, but it's one of them. It's good to kind of hear that background. But so how long have you been producing and directing for?
Well, I suppose. In television, you know, you might have a researcher's title, but you go and do the odd shoot that you end up directing yourself, or, you know, you get given certain responsibilities that are beyond your title. So it's difficult to pin it down to a certain age or period. You know, quite early on during my TV career, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I was always holding a camera. I was always interested in doing the self-shooting side of things as well. So quite a while now, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, that's always what I wanted to do, basically. As soon as I got my first taste of television, I understood that directing and producing was where I wanted to go with it.
Nice. I hear that. How did you and Daniel Glynn set up AdHoc Films then? Was it from...
in the pub? No, Dan and I used to work at Universal Pictures together, and we both were producing separate shows, and they just... For some reason, in an open plan office, they put us into a glass room together. Maybe we were being too noisy or something. And we just really hit it off as pals. And There was a kind of few other coincidences that touched on our personal lives, whereby we had mutual friends that we never knew about, very good mutual friends. So there was a sort of symmetry going on. And, you know, we talked about what we wanted to do and what the sort of future entailed. And for me, you know, I'd freelanced all my life. And as much as, you know, I was proud of that side of my career, I also wanted to start thinking about the future and building something a little bit different, taking a different direction to just freelancing. And Dan shared that vision as well. And we both have a passion for documentary. So a lot of things knitted together. And we set it up quite a while ago, actually. So we registered the name, and we understood that it was going to be very difficult to suddenly start a business and then go bang into getting business. And one thing we didn't want to do was start in debt, so we decided never to take a loan as a company. What we did was we started to make the migration from freelancing to pure ad hoc over like a couple or 3 years. And that was basically the plan that we had, and now obviously we're just 100% for ad hoc. But you can't go from one to the other because it's like starting your career all over again, and you know, we would have had to have taken quite a big loan to do that, I think.
So that's where the kind of the name Ad Hoc Films came from, or was there some sort?
There's a couple of stories about how that came. Too many stories as to how it came, but it was one of those that when it resonated immediately. We had some terrible names, you know, that we came up with at first. I won't even say them now, but...
Go on,
Dan came up with Fairway Films when we were playing golf once. It just sounded like an Alan Partridge kind of company. No, but we had some terrible ones, but Ad Hoc was, you know, it sort of... it fed into a lot of things that we felt were right representing us. It's one of the hardest things that we did was set up the company name. Come up with a name for a company is one of the hardest things you've got to do. Sounds so easy.
It sounds like everyone thinks it's easy, and then it's kind of like, well, kind of carrying something into the future. But in terms of ad hoc films, what kind of things do you specialize in? Or is there no specialising? Because I know you produce a lot of documentaries and commercials, but for those who don't know, what do you specialise in?
I think there's a common thread through our work, and it is a documentary thread. We feel that, you know, you can take a documentary angle to a 30-second piece or a 2-hour film. So that's the kind of spine to our philosophy. But you're right, we do commercial work, we do corporate work, and we do broadcast television work, and we do the long-form documentary, such as the 4-year plan. But as long as there's some sort of consistency and they all speak to each other in a certain sense, and we ensure that they do, to be honest, then that's kind of our approach. But you know, we're adaptable at the same time. But yeah, we strong narrative is very, very much sort of our ethos in that sense.
I hear that. What inspires you as a filmmaker then, whether it be producing or directing? What kind of makes you want to get up and do it? And also, who inspires you as well, if anyone? The best thing that I've got out personally from like my job is I've been able to meet so many different kinds of people in so many different walks of life. So you end up researching something for someone for one thing, and they're completely out of your kind of comfort zone, or just anything that any previous knowledge that you've got on a certain subject, and you learn something outside of that zone that you normally operate within. And that kind of inspires me, to be honest, because it's a big world out there, and you get to meet a lot of different people as a consequence, and you get to look at things in very different perspectives as a consequence. And I think there's just a kind of hunger that I have for that side of things. I think humanity is really interesting in that sense. I mean, are there any particular producers and or directors that inspire you, or are you kind of self-motivated and self-inspired?
I think you take little elements of lots of people's work and lots of things that you see, and some of it might be quite highly revered, some of it might be less highly revered or underground, and some things might be hated by a lot of people, but you actually, it's a bit of a guilty pleasure of yours. And in the end you sort of draw all those things in, and hopefully it creates your own kind of unique way of working. I wouldn't say that I think it'd be naive to sort of say there's one sort of filmmaker that's specifically influenced me. I think we have so many influences in our lives, and they can be personal as well, such as your parents, as well as, you know, filmmakers or sportsmen or whatever, politicians, whatever it might be. Probably not politicians, whatever it might be though.
The only things the only things they encourage is corruption, but
yeah,
sounds like
they've just been beaten to the number one spot by the bankers, apparently. So they're all right now.
In terms of football, obviously we're always gonna bring it back to that. What football team do you support?
Sheffield Wednesday.
Why?
Because my dad does, basically. My father is from Sheffield. His family are from Sheffield, and his father played for Sheffield United. And my dad went to see a Sheffield United game, and I think that they drew 2-2. And the following week, his uncle took him to see Sheffield Wednesday, and they won 8-3. So as an impressionable kid, he said, "Oh, I'll go where the goals are." So he became, he said, "I just want to go to Hillsborough now. I want to watch Sheffield Wednesday." And growing up, I had it sort of ground into me that there is only one football team, and it's Sheffield Wednesday. And if I ever have a son, I'll do the same to him, probably.
In terms of Sheffield Wednesday, what did you think of their stint in the Premier League in the mid-90s?
It was great. I mean, the thing is when you sort of grow up with a team being... I mean, Wednesday was sort of a bit rubbish when I first got into them, and then they went up to the Premier League, and then we stayed there for a few years, and you get used to it, and then you get spoiled, and actually then they go down, and then the reality hits in. But I would say, sort of from a supporting point of view, whether it was my age at the time or not, but when they went down into the lower divisions, I actually watched them more than I did when they were in the Premier League. And I did sort of feel a bit more of an affinity to the club when they were going to Brentford and those sort of grounds. And I enjoyed it a lot. I really enjoyed being a Wednesday fan at those times. I'd be lying though if I said I wasn't desperate for them to get up to the Premier League, And I'll go and watch them as much as I can in the Premier League, obviously, but that might not happen soon, you never know.
I mean, it's an interesting point you bring up about you felt more of an affinity towards them when they dropped down the divisions. I mean, why do you think that is? Do you think it's because when you're lower down, you kind of need to rely on the fans that bit more rather than the cash cow that is the Premier League? Yeah,
I think that's a good point, and I think that whether we like to admit it or not, we want to feel like we can prove that we're not fair weather fans, and it gave some of us a chance to prove that we're not fair weather fans just going because they're in the Premier League. It's a bit of a romantic notion at the end of the day, but there is that element in football fans, I think. But you're right as well. You feel like if you can, it feels your sort of £20, £25 feels like it's benefiting the club more probably when they really need it at those periods, and rather than when they're in the Premier League and they squandered your £20, £25.
Because I remember Sheffield Wednesday in the Premier League with the likes of Di Canio, Carbone, Pressman in goal, Des Walker in his last few years.
Yeah, you never beat him though.
Towards that, he was good. He was good. I'll go give him that. He was good. Reggie Blinker somehow disappeared out of all of those guys. Yeah. But I find it interesting sometimes when a team goes down, and it's not like they never come back up, but I mean Wednesday could very well come up next year considering they got promotion last year. But when Sheffield United went up, what were your feelings? What were your feelings then? Because that must have been quite interesting. Because Wednesday were in League One when United went up. So what did you think when they went up, and what did you think when Sheffield United went down as well? Because Neil Warnock, there's a link there with the 4-year plan already. It's kind of like Neil Warnock has been, for me as a Liverpool fan, I've always seen Neil Warnock as somewhat of a bitter BITC. Finish that one off, because he's always complained about if Liverpool didn't play a weakened team at Fulham, then Sheffield United wouldn't have gone down. But then you look at the last day when they played Wigan, John Stead scored that header, but he got knocked out, and in the stoppage time for him getting knocked out, Unsworth scores a penalty and then sends him down.
If Granny had cojones, isn't it? I mean, you can go back further and further and further. To go back to your previous point, when Sheffield United got promoted, I mean, I don't hate Sheffield United because of the links with the family, and I'm not really into this kind of, hating between football clubs. I was a bit jealous. I'll admit that. Could have done without them going up. but I didn't think they'd last that long, to be honest. My opinion of Warnock at the time was probably quite low. But actually, now I got to know him doing the 4-year plan, obviously, and the first thing I said to him was, "We won't get on." You know, I'm a Wednesday.
Because of the Sheffield divide.
I'm a Wednesday, and I know what you've said about my club. But in all truth, I understood very quickly he's playing a game, and he ring fences whatever situation he's in. He does it with his family, he does it with his football club, you know, he does it with friends, and he's very loyal to that situation, and he'll do whatever he can to, you know, ward people away or even attack outsiders. And that's what he was doing with the Liverpool situation, with the Tevez thing, you know, whatever. It's a professional sort of way of approaching it in a way that looks a little bit unprofessional perhaps, but I completely understand why he does it. And I really like Neil Warnock now, which I never thought I'd say those words, but he's a fantastic guy. He's a really, really great, generous, funny guy. I've got a lot of time for him, so it just goes to show what you see through the media perhaps and through the papers. You know, the reality is very, very different to that with Neil.
Definitely.
Okay, that's good to hear. We're gonna come back onto that in spades actually.
Okay.
But in terms of favorite players, past and present, who are some of your favorite players, whether it be from Sheffield Wednesday, from international teams, who are some of your favorite players, past and present?
Past was John Sheridan when I was growing up. He scored a goal against Luton that was a free kick that he flicked up and then scored it. And it was just, when I was younger, you know, I used to kick a ball about all day long. I tried to replicate that goal a million times. Similarly, David Hurst scored one against Liverpool, actually. We won 2-0 in 1989. And
we won't bring up that year, 89.
But it's not just when...
I wasn't supporting Liverpool back then, but my co-host, the G, was always like, 89, Michael Thomas.
Yeah, there you go, that year.
All right, he's grinning off camera as well.
So if Hurst hadn't scored that goal, you might have even taken the title. There you go. But it's not just Wednesday players. Other than Chris Waddle as well, he was a real kind of favourite. But no,
was that for his singing ability or his footballing ability?
Both, both.
Because Glenn Hoddle, him and Chris,
yeah,
that was funny.
It was ill-advised. That would never happen now, would it?
It's a shame. Do you know what? It is kind of a shame actually that football has become so sanitised that that you don't get those funny FA Cup songs anymore. I mean, you had the Anfield rap. You had Gazza's Geordie Boys, which was absolutely hilarious. I still love that now.
But going back even further, I was watching Escape to Victory the other Sunday, another guilty pleasure, and you'd never get something like that now. All those high-profile players in a Hollywood movie that's kind of not very Hollywood, you know, it's a bit cheesy. You know, you would never get that now.
That's on a personal note. That's why I like the 4-year plan because documentaries like that. And I don't know if you've seen Orient Club for a Fiver as well. I absolutely love that. And I don't just love it for John Sitton's rants either, because John Sitton he's hilarious. You guys in this FMS. No, you get us out of it. He was brilliant. You see me in the morning. That John Sitton was hilarious. But Orient Club for a Fiver, do I not like that, was funny as well, because you could almost see Graham Taylor losing it as he was going on. In the middle of training, the cameras are here. Like, were you concerning yourself with the cameras? But I personally like to see that side of football, because every week you're seeing the big names on the television, but there is somewhat of a disconnect between players and fans, because for me personally, players are up there and then the fans are kind of there. Not. I mean, I think
in truth,
would you reckon?
I agree with you. I think it's actually turned a bit of a corner with Twitter. I do think Twitter's helped in that front enormously, and I think it's shown that players have been uncomfortable perhaps with the situation they've been in, because once Twitter exploded, a lot of players got on Twitter and were very keen to reach out to the fans. So it makes you wonder. I mean, within football, within celebrity, you know, there's a third party that probably acts as a bit of a moat between the fans and the personality. And I think that was the problem. So maybe it wasn't the actual players themselves. You know, they're pretty down to earth, a lot of the players, I'm sure. And Twitter's kind of proven that in a way.
I mean, in terms of, going back to about the whole kind of cup final songs and that kind of thing. Do you think that football needs to almost lighten up a bit in comparison from kind of comparing it to what it is now in terms of football clubs being businesses and extremely badly run businesses, as I've said on many a pitch talk show. Do you think that football teams need to lighten up and start to see the funny side of things? And
I think when you see footballers with that sort of wall broken down, when you saw the sport relief thing that the England squad did with James Corden, for example, I think Arsenal players did a Citroen advert recently where they were ballet dancers and these kind of things. The amount of hits they get, online, the kind of the thirst for these things from fans is enormous, and it's because they do want to see them in a different environment, in a different guise to just the player or just the celebrity side of them. And breaking that wall, it does a lot for the players as well. I think it shows a real human side to them, so they benefit from it as well as the fan. The fans just lap it up there, don't they? We all want to see all that stuff. It's great.
Because I said there were stories in the past, and that. During the summer, one of the pitch talk co-hosts, the G-Man, who's here with us, has been doing the Legends of '96 and segment on the show as a special feature. And one of the things, as soon as I think Paul Gascoigne was one of the people featured on it, and as soon as you hear the name Paul Gascoigne and Euro '96, two things pop up to mind for me: him making Colin Hendry look stupid against Scotland and that goal, and the dentist chair celebration straight after. There's also that miss against Germany, but we tried to kind of
brush over
rip that from the memory. Just like USA '94, or as I like to call it, England's forgotten World Cup. But it's a case of what are there certain players that really that in the game who entertain you? Or are all the players just
you can't expect everybody to have charisma and personality. I mean, in every walk of life. So sometimes I guess we judge some players a bit harshly and Michael Owen's boring or something like that. Well, actually, he's just Michael, he's just a guy making a living or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Andy Murray gets it a lot, he's so miserable.
He's really doing.
Well, I mean, he's not a comedian, he's not a stand-up comedian, he's a tennis player. And some footballers have an extra edge to them, though. There is no question about it. Some cricketers do, etc., etc. And Gazza was obviously one of them. They're sort of a bit of a dying breed now because I think they do get media controlled more, and that's why Balotelli, for all of his kind of faults, has been a breath of fresh air. I mean, I'm not a massive fan of a lot of what he does because I think he's quite a bad example in a lot of ways, and his manners are bad and all that sort of thing, if I can sound a little bit sort of prudish about it. But he's also got this kind of it's a freedom about him that I think is quite endearing as well. And he does things that are a little bit off the scale, and you take the rough with the smooth in that sense, don't you? And I think we kind of do want to see these characters at the end of the day. Well, we don't want to see Mary Poppins play Mary Poppins 11, do we? It's okay to have a few sort of bad apples and whatnot, as long as they don't go overboard. And some players do go over the top. And
the 4-year plan, Matt, is about this time where we're obviously going to go into one of your works. So, ready?
Sure.
Literally?
No, please.
What did you want to achieve with the 4-year plan documentary?
I wanted to make a film about... I'm interested in finance in football. I'm interested in ownership. I'm interested in boardroom level. What's it like to own a football club? The question gets asked, what's it like to be a footballer? What's it like to be a football manager?
Yeah.
I wanted to go right to the top. And I think it was a real kind of period when football ownership was coming under scrutiny anyway, when we started this film. So I wanted to kind of investigate that side of things and expose, you know, what it was like from all sorts of angles. I didn't know what these guys were going to be like because it's an in the moment documentary. You know, it's observational documentary, so you don't know how it's going to play out. Obviously, I didn't know that they were going to go through this kind of roller coaster ride. But that's basically what I wanted to follow a club as well from the inside that perhaps hadn't been done to that extent as well. And that was probably the biggest challenge, I think. You know.
Okay. No, that's cool. So, did you feel you achieved the goal?
I mean, yeah, I think generally, I think that would be a fair comment. There's always things that you want to do more, or you would do slightly differently. I can't really complain, if I'm honest. I mean, the level of access I got, you know, I can't complain about that, of course. And I think that it did highlight certain things. I hope that it will be seen as a bit of a film of the time, a slice of history in that sense, just to represent what football ownership was like in that period of time, or it is still, to be honest. But, you know, time will tell on that front, I don't know. And yeah, I mean, getting in the sort of back corridors of a football club, I think I did achieve that, yeah.
Okay.
One way or another.
I personally think you did. I mean, I personally with no brown nosing or anything, but I think it was. I mean, I've watched the 4-year plan a couple of times. I think guys watch it a couple of times as well, and it's always enjoyable. We've got Johnny Sykes via email asks, what made you want to take up QPR as your focal point rather than another team and film it?
It wasn't really kind of QPR. I mean, I was working with another company that were doing stuff with the Mittells anyway, but the story was not necessarily QPR. The story was the billionaire ownership, and that was the media splash at the time, and that was very clearly going to be a big story. I think what I wanted to do, and I'm not sure everybody at the same time wanted to do, was a lot of people wanted to make it about the team. Okay, so we've come in, we put all the money in, you know, so what's going to happen here? Oh, well, the team are going to get promoted. The story for me were the owners. So that was very much where I put the emphasis. So, I mean, had these guys gone in and bought Leyton Orient or Brentford, then it probably would have been that club as well. But QPR fits in so many ways. Its location is fantastic. You know, it's London. These guys bought it for that. That was one of the reasons, I'm certain. But yeah, I mean, I think that, like I say, it wasn't necessarily about the club itself. It was probably more about the owners. But then QPR have always had stories go around them, so it was in the, you know.
But they've had some great players. They've had some great players go through. Right? I mean, you look at Crouch in more recent times, David Seaman, Les Ferdinand, Nigel Quasi being one of their alumni as well, John Spencer. So they've had quite a few.
Well, you go back, obviously Bowles and Marsh, you know. So yeah, they had a great team in the '70s that pushed. I think they pushed Liverpool right to the edge on the title, and you know, they are a small club, so they've always punched above their weight. However, during this period when these owners came in, they were, you know, rock bottom, obviously.
Oh, definitely. Russ Vernon via email has said, "Hi Matt, I want to know, how did you make the documentary and was it fun?"
How did I make the documentary? That's going to be a long answer.
I don't think Russ is going to mind that.
Let's give an overview. Basically, pretty much me with a camera. I had an assistant producer that did a lot of secondary shooting on it as well, and I had a fantastic editor, Wes Lippman, who was dedicated to it from the outset, who would continue to evolve the story in the edit, and that was a real key to the film, to be honest.
He's your senior editor at AdHoc Films?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And the guy's, you know, he's a genius. And then a fantastic producer in Dan Glynn as well. So that's how the film was made, with a very small core team, but very dedicated, and we all knew what we wanted to do with the film. You know, the vision was clear with this film. And I think that helped as well. When you're on the same page as everyone, it's a good place to be honest. And it's quite rare, you know. But we all work completely in line with what we wanted to do with this film.
Nice one. We've got a video question. from someone familiar. I think it's someone familiar.
Hi Matt, it's the G-Man here. I've got 3 questions for you. First being, QPR 4-year plan obviously follows the day-to-day running of the football club. But if you had the chance to follow a particular player, who would it be and why?
There it is. From our co-host, the G-Man.
That's a good question. I think we've mentioned him already. I think I'd follow Balotelli. I can't think of many other footballers at the moment that would be more entertaining to follow with a camera. I think he'd probably let you as well. You know, he's the one person that would stand up to his advisors and say, no, you know, I'm going to do this, whatever. And I can't think of many other footballers who'd be quite so entertaining. And he's charismatic on camera, and you know, I think he'd be pretty interesting documentary material, Mario.
Yeah. I mean, some of the rumours about Balotelli, I mean, we've mentioned some of them on the show, but my favourite Balotelli rumour was the one about him apparently dressing up, because it never got proven, but him apparently dressing up in a Santa suit and throwing out 50 quid notes in Manchester. Yeah. When I heard that, I was hoping it was true,
I think
just for the joke value of it. That would have been classic if it was true.
But it says something about the guy that's believable, and whether it's become an urban sort of myth or not, you know, there's a sort of grey area. That's the environment that he's sort of created and perpetuates, and there's not many kind of characters out there that you could say that about, and you'd be a bit like, it could actually be true, that, you know?
Because someone like Michael Owen, as you mentioned earlier, who gets criticised all the time by Piers Morgan for being boring. You couldn't imagine Michael Owen doing that. No. Gaza, in his heyday, maybe he could have got away with it. But I don't know, just Mario Balotelli is, as you say, there is something about him. He's just like a mystery wrapped in.
You don't have to like him, but it'd be entertaining.
Yeah. I gotta say,
no, but I know a lot of people don't like him. But they still watch.
As much as I call him, well, it's guilty pleasure thing. It's like you may not like him, but you still watch it. There's a lot of celebrities I've got no time for at all, but that's for a different show. But it's one of them. Was with Balotelli, he does. It's almost waiting to see what he does next, whether it's positive, negative. You'd hope it's positive, but that 9 times out of 10, you look hard enough for the negative, you'll find it. But
do you
think the media is unfair on Balotelli?
Well, you say that, but I think that they are also looking for the positive, because too many negatives, and then people won't be interested at all, as we've seen with certain other players. Sure. But I don't know if you noticed during the Euros, they were pushing this photo out of Mario hugging his adoptive mother. Yeah. And that was obviously seen as a huge positive. And now they're looking for stuff like that as well, you know, because it keeps the interest up, and it's this two-sided nature of the character. And I think the media's interested in this sort of duality that's going on with him, and they can't have one without the other, basically.
Yeah. Because I tend to think that they're really looking. They're almost always looking for the negative about him, and it's like, well, against Arsenal, he looked like he was trying to get himself sent off, and you've got that balanced with the stuff with him tears streaming down his face after the final and stuff like that. But I don't know. I see it as the tabloids, especially, always look for the negative in it, just because they look for the negative generally in society. But
I think he's quite liked, to be honest. Though I don't think it's that negative. I think next season will be the real test for him. I think we'll either get very bored of him, or he'll actually sort of cement himself as actually being a bit of a sort of wrong 'un that's kind of turned it around a little bit.
I love the wrong and mentioned. It's the case. I mean, I get called a wrong and on pitch talk shows for certain reasons, but it's a case of I just love them sort of characters, like Jimmy Bullard as well, as a character. To me, was funny when he was at Wigan. When there was something going on. There was something going on in the pitch, and he's doing leapfrogs over people.
Yeah, or like when they scored the goal at Hull, and he did the team talk. You know, when they scored the goal, taking the mickey out of his manager, Phil Brown. Phil Brown. So
that was brilliant.
No, you're absolutely right, but he doesn't quite have the baggage of Balotelli.
No, true. No, true.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you got to love the characters of the game. I mean, like we were mentioning earlier with Orient Club for a Fiver and John Sitton. The guy, love the guy just for that.
Yeah.
Just because he was brash. He was like opinionated. Love it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you'd follow Balotelli though. That is.
Well, I can't think of another one, to be honest. I've been thinking as you talk, I still can't think of another one. So, it's Mario.
I mean, what was it like trying to get access to QPR to do the documentary in the first place? I mean, did you have to jump through a lot of hoops, or were they quite encouraging and quite receptive of the cameras?
I think you're sort of left to find your own way. I mean, you can look at it in two ways. You can sort of say, it was hard at first, there is no question about it, and I sort of adopted this gorillas in the mist approach.
I'm glad you did that rather than kind of the adult bookstore approach.
Yeah. But you kind of have to sort of hang back and slowly and get them used to it. Because otherwise if you go the other way as a documentary maker, you're in their face and they're going to get out, we've had enough of this isn't working for us. So you've got to be very delicate and sensitive to those situations. But you've also got to get your footage.
Yeah.
So what I actually did at the beginning was I saturated filming to the extent where I knew I was filming things I would never use in a million years. But what that did was it got them very comfortable with me being around, got them used to me being around a lot, because I knew I was going to need that further down the line. Them sort of saying, well, hang on, you only come for this thing or not that,
Yeah.
But also it made them not necessarily, they couldn't editorialise things because they weren't picking and choosing when I was there and what I was actually recording. So if I recorded everything, then I understood that I could cherry pick what I wanted. And I was more in control from that point of view, So I made it clear to them, you might not tell me what meetings to come to because you don't want me to come to them, but also you can't tell me what meetings to come to because you do want me at them, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Leave it to me and I will just saturate everything.
Because I've read that you had over 100 hours of footage. Is that true?
900 hours.
900.
Yeah.
Oh my! How did the process happen in terms of getting it down to 96 minutes?
As I say, we edited as we went along. So at the end of the first season, we had an hour and a half cut. It was pretty good.
Yeah.
But then if you look at the final cut now, I imagine that there's 20%, 25% of the final film was from that hour and 45. Also, it changed a lot. It evolved with so many different cuts. I mean, 20, 30, 40 different cuts of this film by the end. It just evolved so much throughout the process. So you get new footage coming in, but you've got your hour and a half, 2 hours, and you're adding onto it, but you're scaling into it, you're chopping into it, you're reforming your story. There were loads of scenes that we cut out that we then put back in or revisited, because like whatever feeds into your overall arc is what you're going to need at the end, but you don't really know that until you're at the end.
Yeah.
But you've got a structure and you've got a spine, and all the really hard work is done by that point. So you've got so many scenes cut, and then you can sort of pull and push.
As a personal question, me being an editor, before we go on to our next fan question, who was the fan of the time lapses? Because there were a lot of time. I noticed that there were a lot of time lapses in it.
I'll blame myself for that. It's a film over a long period of time. So it had to have some way of communicating seasonal changes and time, etc. And the time lapses also, they were one thing that we could just go and shoot very easily because we're close to the ground. Yeah. So we had a bank of every season, every angle, every part, as a time lapse. And, I think they add a bit of movement, and they're quite dynamic at times when the film needs it as well. So blame me for that.
I mean, I wasn't saying there's a criticism. It's just kind of like I noticed that there were quite a few, so it's kind of like okay.
It's a film over a long time.
It worked. It did work. I just noticed that there was quite a few.
Yeah. Well, you're an editor.
Yeah. So it's kind of
there you go.
I had to.
If I didn't, I'd be worried if I didn't pick it out. But Johnny Sykes via email. Was there anything that the organisation said was off limits when it came to producing the documentary? I know you've slightly touched on it, but Johnny Sykes.
No, there wasn't, and I mean, I think that most people assume that that would be the case, and I would as well. I mean, just given the protagonists involved and they're quite powerful people, etc.
Yeah.
But I think that if you actually watch the film, you can see that there wasn't anything. I mean, you know, there's some pretty volatile moments where they're getting dog's abuse.
Yeah.
And, you know, they understood very quickly that this will be a story that will be warts and all, and will be, you know, reflecting them in negative lights as well as positive lights, and it will be a sort of cocktail of all these different things, but it's over a long period of time, and they make mistakes, and we've got to see those mistakes, you know, and they understood that. And I think, you know, whatever your opinion of anybody in this film, credit where credit goes, because that is something that not many people will allow in a documentary, and a documentary becomes weaker as a consequence. You might protect your position, but it weakens the product.
I hear that. I hear that. We've got another video question from someone familiar again.
My second question for you is, whilst filming, what was the strangest request that you faced?
There we go.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Strange request from where?
From anyone, whether it be Flavio, Bernie, Amit, or anyone else. Just the strangest request you had, whether it be leave a room for a specific reason.
Oh, right.
Or what was and also what was the strangest occurrence during the filming as well?
Definitely following Flavio into the toilet was the weirdest thing. You know, that was overstepping the boundary.
Can you leave me alone? I need to take a crap.
Sometimes you're behind the camera and you get so intensely locked into what you're filming and who you're filming that you actually can't see the wood for the trees. And I was following him down the corridor. I know the geography of that ground like the back of my hand. I could walk it blindfolded.
Yeah.
So I knew where I was going, and I'm in the urinals with him, and I got a camera pointing at him, and
I hope that camera stayed up rather than down.
Yeah. Don't worry. I mean, he turned and he sort of told me in no uncertain terms to get out of there, which is fair enough. You know, I mean, a man should not be in the toilets with a camera. I'm sorry. So I held my hands up to that one. I wasn't really told. Any other request was sort of. I was left alone a lot. I got to say, you know. I mean, I think people would imagine, and I would imagine that I was told to get out of this room or not. I mean, I can think of being told to F off once by Flavio.
Yeah.
I didn't mind it at all.
Yeah.
Because I don't mind it. But I wasn't told to leave meetings, or I wasn't told I couldn't come in, or, you know. I think there might have been a team talk once that the door was shut on me. There was also another occasion where I was filming in the dressing room at an away game. It was the last game of the season against Preston. And I got a little bit of kind of abuse from some of the players at that time. You know, I just stood my ground. But I remember that being one of the hairiest moments of the documentary. Another hairy moment was up at Sheffield, actually. When I started the film, I did stuff with fans, because I wasn't sure quite what the format of the film was going to be at that point. So I actually did a few vox pops as safeties, and I was in a pub, and there was a drunk fan that grabbed my microphone, and I get very possessive about my equipment.
From Declan Finley on email, Dear Pitch Talk, I can't explain how important this documentary was for the fans of QPR, and I believe it also helped oust the villains at the helm. We all owe Mat Hodgson a pint and a handshake. It's a nice offer from Declan there. One thing that's kept coming up when I've watched the evidence, this being how and why did Flavio allow all of the goings on to be recorded and furtherly allowed it to go on until the end of his clutching reign, despite the obvious aftermath it would create. And that's from Declan Finley on email.
Okay. I think there has been a sort of culture change within the club since the film. I'm not going to take credit for that at all, but I think that that would have happened anyway, but I think it was accelerated by the film, and I think it certainly. I can understand why QPR fans think it's important for them, because obviously I worked amongst them for a few years, and I could see their frustrations, and I don't think anyone really believed what was going on at their football club, and why would they, in a way? But you just get sort of tittle-tattle in newspapers, whereas what this film did was enable them to actually say, I told you so. You know?
Yeah.
And I think that would be kind of a cool situation to be in when you've gone through, you know, a few years of darkness. As far as Flavio, what's that, Flavio, why did he allow the goings-on to be recorded?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, so with documentary, at the end of the day, you know, why would you allow anything? I think he believed he was going to achieve promotion, and he wanted that documented. It was an exciting period of their lives, whichever way you look at it. You know, we're owning a football club.
Yeah.
We've got a very clear goal. We want to get into the Premier League.
Because it's something different for Flavio as well, because obviously he was part of Renault in Formula One, and Bernie Eccleston was he's basically the head honcho of F1.
Yeah. Well, I think it's okay to sort of say, I'm doing something different and I want to see it documented. I think that takes cojones, shall we say. And I think to allow that to go out, as we know there's going to be a lot of negativity in it, also, you know, reflects that. So I think in our position, it's really easy to moan about people, oh, look at the way they came across on this, or he's such and such an idiot. Do you know what? There's a lot more grey areas to a lot of these things. Yeah. And yeah, you can form an opinion on people from this, that and the other, but you can't form an opinion unless they're honest enough in the first place to allow them to open themselves up to you, so you can form an opinion. And that's kind of what he did with his film. And you know, too often people sanitize their public persona, and he hasn't done that. Yeah. And you know, nobody's perfect. He's not perfect. I'm not perfect. If we all had a camera follow us around for 4 years, I'm sure we could all kind of come across with varying degrees of, you know, likability, shall we say? And you know, if nothing else, he had the honesty and bravery to show everybody how this football club was run for 4 years.
Do you know, our next question is an email question, but I'm gonna skip it and come back to it because you mentioned Flavio and kind of warts and all. Was Flavio Briatore as fiery off camera as he was on camera? Because especially with the whole Paulo Sousa thing, it's like, oh, you've got it's 4-4-2, 4-4-2, 4-4-2. He looked like he wanted to punch his lights out. But Sousa just had no comeback.
I mean, he has his moments. I mean, the thing about Flavio is he's so convinced about what he says. And he's got this amazing ability to convince other people of what he's saying as well, is the only way. And, you know, sometimes that can be a little bit blinkered, shall we say. He's an incredibly charismatic man. I mean, when he turns the charm on, it's something to behold. You know, you get a, like, I remember we went up to Birmingham and he started talking to the stewards there and he was charming the pants off these guys, you know, and then he's working the room, and we went to Villa and he was working the room there with Andy Leonard, and so he's very good at that side of things, and you can see why people like him in business. Yeah. You know, he knows what he wants, and he takes control of a situation, and he's a decision maker. He is a bit fiery, you know, I'm sure, but you know, he's not outlandishly fiery. I didn't see him throw things or get outraged in any sense like that. He would get angry about things, but that's because he wasn't getting what he wanted, you know.
So he didn't do a Brian Laws. I think when Brian Laws was managing Sheffield United, the plate of chicken wings. He didn't do that.
Not that I saw, no.
Johnny Sachs again from me via email. Through all the upheaval and the constant strife at QPR, you were allowed to carry on filming. Was there ever a time when they said switch the cameras off? Now I know you've answered that in part, but
well, no, there was. I think what he means is was there a period in time perhaps, and there were periods in time when the film was canned basically, and you know, they were horrible times because I knew that I was building some momentum with this film, and I knew that I was getting some really good stuff. And to sort of see that dream, you know, slip away was really heartbreaking at times. But you know, you just do what you can to resurrect it and keep the pulse alive on it, and we did. You know, we knew that if we could just get to a next point, then you know we could try and get another sort of green light from them, etc. It got canned several times, but it got resurrected, just as many times, thankfully.
Johnny Sykes via email. What do you think of Tony Fernandez being the main man in charge now, and what are your views on Flavio and Palladini as well?
I think Tony Fernandez is fantastic. I mean, he's erudite. He's got the club's best wishes, interests. At heart. He's a massively successful businessman and understands, business. Unlike many others, to be honest, what he's done with those two airline companies out in Asia. But he comes across so well. He seems so personable, and I think that the fans needed that sort of difference after the last regime. Bernie wasn't particularly vocal with the fans, or if he was, then it probably wasn't, saying the sort of things they wanted to hear, shall we say? Yeah. And Flavio just ran things in a more impassioned fashion, whereas Tony's a bit more measured. I've never met the guy, but I think that what he's done, from people I've spoken to at the club, he's lifted the mood after perhaps it had gone a bit back down again. So, you can't fault the guy. I think he's a dream chairman for a lot of people.
I mean, what about Palladini as well?
Well, Gianni, I'm really fond of Gianni. I mean, I know that he's warts and all, so it's easy to pick pieces in someone who's warts and all, isn't it? With me, he was so generous with his time, and I think part of Palladini's problem is he's trying to please everybody. Yeah. He's one of those kind of characters, which you can never do. So you end up disappointing or letting people down. But it's a positive flaw, if that makes sense to have. So I was always very grateful to Gianni for everything that he did with regards to access and time, and even the odd lift I'd get to an away game if need be. He was always forthcoming in those senses, and I do appreciate that completely. You can't fault the guy's passion, Yeah. And as for Flavio, I admire Flavio. I mean, I know that people probably imagine him to be this, that, and the other, but I never had one problem with Flavio. Straight down the line, I like that about him. There's no hidden agenda when he's talking to you. He's very truthful when he talks to you about what he's thinking.
So he's very much a straight shooter, for lack of a better term.
Completely a straight shooter. But I like those kind of people, and you know where you stand, and there's no doubt, in the back of your mind. So I sort of I remember when Flavio sort of stepped down as chairman. And I kind of missed him a bit because he was great on camera and he was entertaining. Yeah. But he also just had this kind of presence about him,
I mean, especially the one thing that always just kind of sticks out for me is the Paulo Sousa moment in the boardroom. 4-2. Yeah. There's that bit, and in the stands as well. Oh, sack him, he's crap. Yeah. And it's a performance.
It's a legendary performance from Flavio. That film wouldn't be half of what it is without Flavio. You have to say that. I mean, that's. It's an incredible sort of character that he has, larger than life character, and that sort of resonates throughout the film, I think. And I mean, from a documentary point of view, he was just like perfect, perfect.
I mean, what about I want to add a bit to Johnny Sykes' question, and what about Amit Bhatia as well? What was he like? Because he doesn't really get mentioned as much as Briatore, because Briatore was so fiery on camera. But what was Bhatia like? Because I remember there was I think there's one bit in one of the boardrooms where he's like, right, we could cut cost here with the food and the catering without the kind of degrading the quality. We could cut costs here, and he looked like the real the real kind of OCD kind of money man.
Well, that scene's important because I really wanted that scene in the film because of what it said about modern football. Because he starts by talking about, we'll cut the menu and the hospitality by £1, we'll cut the flowers on a match day by £300. Over the course of a season, that will save us, £300,000, really important. And there's no player sales, so that's great. So they're happy to pay the players 20 grand a week. Yeah. But they've got to save back on £1 on the menu. That says everything about modern football. Yeah. But to be fair, Amit was trying to just apply his business brain to the part of football he could influence immediately. The players' wages, he can't do much about that at the moment because that's set throughout the whole industry. Yeah. But running a business in a more streamlined fashion. That's why I love that scene so much. And Amit's a businessman in that sense, and he's very measured. I think he really matured and developed during the course of this filming. So at the beginning, he's quite. He sort of agrees with a lot of Flavio's saying. He's a little bit meeker, perhaps. He's not a meek character. He's a really strong character, Amit. But at the beginning of the film, and I think he was just sort of finding his way through the dynamics that were created between him and Flavio and Gianni, etc. But by the end of the film, he really stands up and carries that club through, I think. And I think that he deserves so much credit for the way that club got leadership back on track and up to the Premier League.
A little bit more I want to add to that question as well. I'm a host, I'm kind of allowed to do it. But Bernie Eccleston, he wasn't featured much, and obviously there's going to be good reason for that, but did he seem almost distant? Because I always felt to myself that obviously Briatore was always the front man. He was always in the papers. Mittal was always giving interviews. I remember reading one of his interviews in the Metro when he took over. But I'm just wondering about how was Eccleston, because obviously he's running Formula One, so he's basically in control of a whole sport. I mean, what was he like in terms of football? Did he have an affinity to the game, or did he have a real affinity towards QPR, or was he just kind of there because Flavio was about and they were friends? Or
the story is that when Flavio and Bernie bought Queen's Park Rangers, they actually thought it was a restaurant in West London.
That is brilliant.
So that maybe, says a lot about it. But look, they bought into it and they got into it. And Bernie was there at every single game. Now, he wasn't there down the training ground every single day like Flavio was, but that's not normal anyway to do that. So Flavio just took it to another degree, and Amit kind of backed him up on that sense. But I suppose the way Bernie ran the club was probably like a lot of football clubs are run, arm's length. He was at every game. I mean, sometimes I used to. I mean, a lot of the times I used to sit in the director's box, and Bernie would be there, as much as he could, and he might leave a little bit before the end. And sometimes I'd sit behind him, and he'd always be looking at other football results on his phone.
Yeah.
He was obsessed with other football results on his phone throughout a match, more than he'd be watching the actual QPR game. I don't know why.
Yeah,
I was gonna say it might be one of them ones where like either he's really into football and he's just trying to figure out the permutations of something, or it might just have been that he was he didn't really give much about the club.
Yeah, I think the Bernie Eccleston sort of era will be viewed, look back at now as being a business venture for Bernie, and there's no problem with that at all, is there really? Because at the end of the day, he made money out of the club. They got promotion. He shape-shifted a bit with his shares. But I think that a lot of people are in football to make money.
Yeah.
Whether you're an owner, a player,
Yeah.
even the guy selling the pies outside the ground, you're taking advantage of walking trade. And I think, like I say, Bernie's association with Queen's Park Rangers will probably be seen purely as a business one.
I hear that. Another question, Matt Whitfield via email. What was it like to get to see the stars on a day-to-day basis?
Okay.
From Matt Whitfield there on this.
The players, I intentionally didn't want to get close to the players. I didn't see it as my job, really, to be sort of pally with players. And I'd witnessed people around the club being very pally with players, and I found it a bit cringy, to be honest.
Yeah.
They have their own pack. And they don't really want anyone else in that pack, They're kind of. I was an outsider. I got accepted more by some than others. To be honest, I would understand if none of them accepted me. I really, I understand how team sport works, and they've got to sort of ring fence a little bit as players. Anyway, there's a guy walking around your changing rooms with a camera. I mean, I wouldn't be that happy about it, to be honest. So I understood where my place was amongst the players. But they were all, a decent enough bunch, obviously. What I did enjoy was watching training. I enjoyed sitting and watching training every day. And I did used to think, this is a great life you've got. And I would be impressed with the level of skill that I would see on the training ground. And And I just enjoyed watching managers training, coaches training, and players, responding, etc. And I thought it was cool being down the training ground pretty much every day.
Would you ever get into coaching, or if AdHoc took a different turn and you were able to kind of step back, would you be interested in football coaching? Because I know you were just saying about enjoying being down the training ground.
No, I don't think it's for me. I mean, purely because I think there are so many people who've worked really hard towards coaching for many years. And for me to just sort of say, yeah, I can have a go at that, I think that'd be a bit disrespectful. Yeah. I think it's a real skill coaching. And I think that a lot of people do their badges and earn their stripes for many, many years just out of the love of coaching. Yeah. I'd happily take on an under-9s team or something like that. But I don't want to tread on any toes.
There will be little toes to step on.
Yeah, that's true.
From Elliot Waller, what is your opinion on Joey Barton's behaviour? You knew we were going to get to this. Yeah. And Elliot Waller is one of our regulars.
Joey Barton he's another really interesting character. He divides opinion, he splits opinion. I speak to as many people who say I like Joey Barton as people who say I don't like Joey Barton. He's fully aware that that's his, the way he's perceived.
So he's kind of the Marmite footballer.
He is, yeah. I mean, to be fair, I think what can I say about Joey Barton? I actually saw him in a different light when he joined QPR, and maybe I was looking at things through slightly rose-tinted glasses, and I started to read his tweets, and I started to think, he's a complex character, and maybe there's some hidden depths here, and he's obviously got some sort of duality to his personality, and that's fine, and that's kind of interesting in a way. But sometimes I think, towards the end of the season, he did overstep the mark with, the way he didn't care about what people thought. And you have got to slightly care about what people think, because that's kind of your moral barometer then, isn't it? Other people sort of act as your moral barometer. And I think he sort of stepped a little bit out. I mean, who am I to tell Joey Barton, what to do and what not to do, to be honest? But, he courts opinion, and people will have opinion on him. And I thought the Man City game, he let himself down. We've all probably let ourselves down. It's just whether he can, stop doing it in the future. And he does have a side of him that many other footballers don't have, which is also very interesting. But it's two extremes. He's not sort of boring and and a bit stupid. He's quite complex, intelligent-wise, and he's very unboring as well. So he's sort of polar ends of the extreme of the scale in that sense.
Do you think I think it was almost £500,000 in terms of fines? Do you think those fines were justified? And also, do you think it's gonna act as a deterrent for him? Because he's 31. So do you think those sort of heavy-handed fines are going to have an impact at him at this stage of his career?
Well, the club had to do all they could, and he was the captain. And I think the captain represents many aspects of the club, but he represents the club, the fans, and he represents the board. And I think that he let all those three sides of things out, and he's admitted it, Yeah. And he's not contested the fine, so I think the club could only do what they could do. I think what was interesting about Joe was it was Neil that brought him in the first place. Yeah. And I think after dealing with Tarab last year, I think Neil thought he could pretty much tame anyone. Yeah. And it was a bold move, and the board backed him in that move when a lot of other people wouldn't have touched him. And I actually thought at the time, these two could, I could see how they could combine. But what Joey had in his armoury that it will always slay a manager is player power. And there's only one manager, whereas there's a squad of several players. And if a few players can unite against a manager, which I think has probably come out, maybe it did happen at QPR, then Neil was always going to be sort of dead man walking. They're not going to perform for him as much as he was performing for the club himself. Because I think Neil was doing a really good job. And I think that not necessarily Joey, but generally players always have that ability to decide to down tools, metaphorically, when it comes to performing on the pitch.
That's true. Very true. Johnny Sachs again via email. Was QPR chairman Gianni Palladini set up to fail by vice chairman Amit Bhatia's in-laws? Did you intentionally edit footage to make him look like he had no control? Do you think Palladini could have achieved things with the club
if he'd been allowed to operate it in the way he wanted. There's quite a bit to take there.
Well, the first one is I mean, was he set up by the vice chairman Amabatu and his in-law? I mean, absolutely not. Gianni was there as an institution at the club, and they came in. So I don't know how they would have set him up. In fact, they gave Gianni a huge amount of responsibility and power at the club, and trusted him, and genuinely trusted him. You know, and whereas there were question marks over him from other quarters. They certainly were supporting him throughout, and even at the end of the film, you see Amit very genuinely say, "Look, whatever happened in this case, I know your love for this club is very real, and you deserve to enjoy this moment of promotion." And he meant that very genuinely, Amit. So I would dismiss that as a concept. Of course, I didn't intentionally edit footage of him to make it look like he had no control. I actually don't think Gianni comes out of it that badly, personally, because there are points when, I mean, it's very clear that sometimes the control is out of Gianni's. He doesn't have control, so that doesn't reflect badly on Gianni necessarily. He's just doing all he can within the parameters, which were quite difficult, sort of, and restricting parameters at the time. So I think he did a pretty good job. I mean, I got to know Gianni really well, and the stress and strain he was under as a person was horrific. You know, I mean, he's a guy in his 60s, and he's a passionate guy that cares a lot, and he takes things very personally. So he was under an enormous amount of strain at certain points during that tenure of Flavio and the Mitals and Bernie. So I don't think he was edited anything other than truthfully, to be honest. And would he have achieved anything if he'd have operated in the way he wanted? I think he would have found it harder. I think Gianni acts on instinct a lot, and sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't. I think he needed a guiding hand every now and again. Yeah. But that guiding hand also needed Gianni every now and again as well. So it was a team effort in the end, in that sense.
Would that be in a footballing sense or a business sense that he would?
Well, both.
He would do the guiding.
Both, because they go sort of hand in hand, don't they? You know, I mean, he was in charge of sort of the deals done with players, etc., etc. But obviously, you've got to have the financial backing and control to do that as well.
Filmmaking is the next chapter. What would be 5 tips you would give to someone who would want to do something similar to QPR, the 4-year plan? In general, what would your be 5? Your 5 tips? 5, yeah? Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think the main thing is to sort of have a vision and an end game. So to say, whatever happens from this starting point, this is where I want to finish, or how I want to finish. And if my journey takes me on all sorts of routes, as long as I'm going in the right direction. So sort of just to keep pushing on through. Yeah. Because it's really easy to sort of stop doing something. Yeah. Oh, very, very really easy. Yeah. And you know, it takes a lot of kind of self-belief sometimes to keep going on through that, because a lot of people, with something like, you know, this sort of film, it's high-risk filmmaking, to be honest. So you are going to get a lot of people tell you you can't do it. So you have to sort of ignore, you know, that sort of thing, and just have some sort of belief in that sense. I think the other thing is to you know, try and get a couple of people around you that you trust and share that sort of vision as well. That's really important. Because you know, there are times when you sort of feel a bit low about things, and you question your sanity a little bit. Yeah. And it's good to have someone to sort of reassure you on that sense. And also, they've got a vested interest in it as filmmakers as well, and understand that process. Is that 2 now?
I think we are at 2. Yeah.
I don't know if I've got many more. No, the other thing is take your opportunity as well. You know, you might identify a story, or a story might just come up that you haven't identified, but take that opportunity, and if something arises that you think you can turn into a good story or documentary, then, you know, pursue that. You know, don't sort of look at something as, oh, it's only going to be like this and that's not for me. Think, how could I maybe make this into what I want to make it as well? The other thing is be prepared to be poor.
Yep.
Wipe out your savings.
I think with the recession, we're all prepared for that.
Yeah, that's probably number one tip actually. That's where you start. No, I mean, and other than that, yeah, it's just a case of just keep going with it. I mean, I know it's the same point as maybe before, but there will be points whenever on any project what you do, there will be points where you sort of think this might not work, you know, and find a way of making it work. You know, there's always a way. I believe with it. I mean, I had a million problems with this film, and the mantra was always there is always a way.
Yeah.
You know, and that was when you were told no, there isn't a way anymore. You sort of pick yourself up and go, no, there'll be a way around this.
Yeah.
And you find a way around it. You know, and sometimes you do it on your own, sometimes you do it with some help, but you find a way around a problem.
I think that's great advice, personally.
Okay.
I think that's great advice. So we've briefly spoken about football ownership.
Yeah.
In terms of QPR, do you think that football ownership has lost its soul in recent years? And the reason I ask that is because you've had a lot of owners in the past who used to really love their clubs, and one of the few left that you can see really loves the club is Dave Whelan at Wigan. I've had my opinion about him recently in terms of Martinez and all that stuff, that Whelan really should have kept his mouth shut. But do you think football ownership has now just become all about how much money you can make rather than progressing and furthering the club?
I think there's room for both. I mean, it has changed. I mean, it's just such a huge multi-billion pound industry now, football, that it was always going to change, and it'd be naive to think that it could still be the local butcher owning, you know, the football club. I think there still are a lot of owners who are local or have the club's interests genuinely at heart, and probably even those that you think aren't like that probably do actually have the football club's interests at heart. But there's another purpose now. You know, there is a purpose which is a commercial purpose, and football's become so commercial, obviously, and that's just evolution. And whether we like it or not, I think that there could be stronger controls on how football ownership is monitored, and you know, the fit and proper persons rule, for example. Yeah. I don't think anyone's ever failed that.
Yeah.
Which means that it's not fit. If no one's failed it, I don't think it's fit.
I might be wrong, but I can't think of one occasion when they've shut the door in someone's face and said, no, you're not fit and proper.
Well, it's weird. Even Shinawatra got through in terms of Man City, and then he got indicted on corruption charges, I think it was.
So it's a nonsense in that sense. And I think that we've seen a few people abuse a football club. I mean, what's happened at Rangers, for example, you know,
God, yeah.
And that's an institution of British football, and that's been completely abused, and that shouldn't be allowed to happen because, you know, there should be much stricter control. It's a very obvious thing to say, but there should be much stricter controls from the authorities, and there's the money there to do it in the game. The problem is there's different factions within the game. There's the FA, there's the Premier League, you know, and I think that sometimes these things fall in the gap between whose responsibility it is, and there needs to be a little bit more sort of crossover on that sense. I know the Football League tried a couple of people with fit and proper persons as well, and they came up with nothing. But I don't know. I feel like the FA have been quite quiet on these things and said, well, it's the league's problem. You know, the leagues want to take all the money, then it's their problem. There's just got to be a little bit more synchronisation between those different factions for me.
Because I remember watching the documentary that Alan Sugar did about money in football, and Richard Scudamore actually said on it, like, it's not in our interest to get rid of clubs. We want to keep clubs. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I think the point was actually being directly spoken about in terms of Portsmouth, who have been passed around like chlamydia at a teenage party. It's one of them, they've been passed around, I think it was 8 owners in 3 years or something, and it's like, I don't know how. First, I don't know how you get the paperwork through that quick to have that many owners, and secondly, I don't know how the Premier League could have let it happen, and especially Scudamore letting it happen. But I mean, it's a case of it's very strange. And you saying that there's not been a case of anyone failing the fit and proper persons test just kind of speaks volumes, really.
Yeah. Well, it raises the question as well as, you know, like what do these clubs actually mean to the authorities in that sense? Do they actually have the interest of the club? Do they have the interest of the fans, the paying customer? But also, you know, I mean, I know we're sponsor driven in this game. It doesn't reflect very well on the game to the sponsors if you've got, you know, some of these owners involved in the game.
Yeah.
Now, the game can endure that because the need for sponsorship is so heavy. But you've got to be careful. You've got to protect, you know, your product in that sense as well. And I think a few clubs and fans have been let down a little bit. And as a consequence, it's reflected badly on the ultimate product, which is the Premier League or the Football League.
Oh, very true. Very true. Do you think the revolving door of football management at the moment, do you agree with the revolving door of football management, as I like to call it, at certain clubs? Because we spoke about Warnock earlier. Do you think he was unfairly sacked? What about AVB as well? Do you think, obviously with the documentary being called the 4-year plan, it was said that AVB was said, right, here's our 3-year plan, you're the man to see it through, and he gets canned after 8 months.
That was his mistake. He should have gone with the 4-year plan, you see. Everyone knows that.
I mean, what do you think about the change in football ownership, and especially in the Championship as well? Because one of the issues we mentioned on a recent show was about Watford being taken over by the Pozzo family. Leeds are were in the process of being taken over as well. There's a Kuwaiti family looking at Nottingham Forest at the time of us sitting here. So, what do you think about the revolving door in terms of management? Because
are you talking managers or boardroom management?
Both.
Oh, okay.
I would say both, especially with the Pompey example, with so many changes in management there and so many people owning so many different parts of the club, and also management because Sean Dyche at the time of us filming this has been sacked, and they're looking to bring Zola in, and this is straight after the Pozzo family have come in. So I mean, what do you think?
Well, that's quite a good example because you've got both in that one club, haven't you? You've got new owners, you've got a new coach, and a second coach.
And also with the continued upheaval at QPR as well, it was quite interesting that there were a lot of changes in management there as well. I mean, what did you think?
I just to go, I think there's a lot of changes in ownership in football because people think they can succeed in this sport and find very quickly that they're failing and they need to sell. And I think Watford probably is a good example that they had to sell. So these guys have come in. Well, we can buy them at a cheaper price. We can succeed. It's high risk. So I think that's where the actual problem kind of comes from in the first place. Is that clubs? It's so hard to succeed financially in this game. Basically, it's impossible. I think. I can't really think of many clubs that do. To be fair. But what you can do is you can do a short-term success that gets you into the big pot of gold is the Premiership. So the big jump from Championship to Premiership is probably that's the best way to be an owner of a football club, and then you cash in like the guys at QPR do. But as far as you can understand why they all sort of think we can succeed in this. But there's different motives, isn't there? Like the Kuwaiti guys might have a different motive to these Italian guys. Just like the sheikhs coming at Man City might have a very different motive to the guys who come in and take over Portsmouth. Sure. There's no correlation between these guys in a way. So, financially they're just batting at completely different stakes. So I think like ownership is confused by basically who's buying the club and what the end game is and what the outgoing management were able to achieve at that club. As for managers' sort of revolving door, I'm a bit old school, but I'm a bit of a hypocrite. Because I don't like it. I don't like managers getting sacked.
No, nor do I. I think a manager deserves at least 3 years.
Yeah, but it never happens. So I support Sheffield Wednesday, and Gary Megson gets the boot after winning the Sheffield derby. And I was outraged. And then we appoint Dave Jones, and we go on a massive unbeaten run and get automatic promotion. That would not have happened under Gary Megson. So it was the right decision.
Yeah.
But then in
Megson had done
League One,
nothing wrong.
But then in League One as well, Lee Clark, he went on I think it was like a 42-match unbeaten streak.
But he drew about 40 of them, didn't he?
But but still, it was a very good streak, and Huddersfield were doing very well. And after three defeats, Clark gets canned.
And then what happened?
And it was
I can't remember whether Huddersfield actually got promoted or not.
And then they got Simon Grayson in.
I don't think they did.
And then they got they won in the playoff final.
They did, yeah.
So again, it goes against your principles, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're hypocrites, but they succeeded, so you can't fault them for that. And the more examples you got like that, then the more people are going to do it, aren't they? I mean, managers don't last long at all. AVB you mentioned earlier, I couldn't see that working at Chelsea.
Yeah.
And again, there was vindication because they sacked him, and then Di Matteo takes Chelsea on to win the FA Cup and the Champions League.
We'll not bring up the FA Cup too much. Being a Liverpool fan, we won't bring it up too much.
But you take my point.
Yeah. No. But at the same time, you can't promise someone that there's a 3-year plan and then can them after 8 months, because at the end of the day, you're basically lying to get them in. And plus, not just lying, with Abramovich, £13 million to get him out of the contract in the first place, and he'd already paid like £70 million just in severance pay. I mean, you look at Scolari as well getting canned quickly. Ancelotti 2 seasons.
But it doesn't work by saying, okay, we're going to give you a 3-year plan, because if after 6 months you find you don't like the methods of this guy, and you've not had that 6 months before you said, no, I'll give you 3 years, then you've got to act. You've changed your mind from when you offered him the 3-year plan. And Chelsea did not like the way Andre Villas-Boas spoke to the players. They didn't like the way he spoke to the media. They didn't like his demeanour around the training ground. You know, everything about this guy, apart from his tactical brain, was poor management. You know, so you got to be the whole package, haven't you? But you shouldn't be throwing out 3-year contracts then. That's the thing, isn't it? There should be like a trial period in football, but that's never going to happen.
Especially if you're going to pay £13 million to get someone out of a contract. There's got to be some sort of trial period. But we've got another video question, again from a familiar entity.
And my last question for you is, I've watched a couple of your interviews, and you've said the Ian Dowie sacking opened your eyes to how cutthroat football was. But what I'd like to ask you is, which of the QPR managers, whilst you were filming, deserved to get sacked?
So there it is. It doesn't sound like an easy question.
I mean, you got to kind of say all of them in a way, because they were all failing. I think the most high profile was Paulo Sousa.
Yeah.
And he came in with this kind of very charismatic, good-looking Portuguese guy, the new Mourinho, his tactical genius. I mean, as a player, he was a legend. But again, you know, much like AVB actually, he sort of alienated the players. I think he got frustrated that they couldn't do what he was doing. He probably needs to manage at a higher level, if that makes sense. You know, like with better players who can actually, you know, respond more. But irrespective of that, you know, he should have the basic coaching capabilities and communication skills, to elicit, you know, better movement, better basic skills out of these players. And I don't think it was really well. I don't think the players took to Paulo, so I can understand why he went. I mean, the others, I mean, Magilton was a bit unlucky. He had a bit of an incident, maybe. Who knows? Paul Hart was a disaster, I'm afraid.
Yeah, he was what, 3 games or something?
Yeah, but he came in with
So
such
short-lived.
negativity, you know. I mean, he sort of brought the whole place down when he came in, and you just knew that wasn't going to last. He lasted 5 games, you know.
No, that's true.
I mean, in relation to Paulo Sousa, like, I would love to have been in that room when Flavio was like, "Oh yeah, it's 4-4-2, 4-4-2, 4-4-2." I would love to have been in. What was it like behind the camera when that was going on? Was there the temptation to laugh?
No. I mean, you never laughed, to be honest. It was captivating. You know, you knew that you were filming a really good scene here. You know, this was meaty, and you knew that they were completely oblivious to the cameras. That was the beauty of it. You know, there was no. They just completely forgot we were there very quickly. They just got into this heated debate very quickly, and they had things they wanted to get off their chest. And when you're in a scene like that, it's fantastic. It's like, actually, I think my favourite scene in the film is a bit similar to that. Is where Flavio called a meeting with Gianni, and I happened to just kind of be there.
Yeah.
And he digs him out about the fouling case and why the FA have got this sort of hanging over them, this charge. And my level of Italian is okay, so I kind of understood what was being said, but you could understand what they were saying just by their demeanour. And I was just loving this kind of electric conversation that was taking place. And then you're like, I can't wait to get this translated. You're sort of running up the road. So yeah, you know when you've got something kind of going on that's gonna, you just know it's gonna make a great scene.
I mean, were there any parts during the filming where you wanted to jump in and give your views, and were you allowed to give your views as to what was happening in front of you?
I made that mistake very early on. We were travelling back from an away game, and I said something to Flavio about they had this young striker on loan from Fiorentina. His name was Samuel Di Carmine. And I said, I sort of mentioned, I said, I've seen him in training, he looks good. And Flavio was like, yeah, he does look good. And I immediately thought, oh God, now Flavio's going to be telling Ian Dowie to pick him now. So after that, I was like, it was just a very innocent conversation. And then I realised the repercussions of what I was saying, perhaps. So after that, I was like, no, I'll keep my mouth shut in all circumstances.
I love it. You
have to be very careful.
Were there any times where you wanted to jump in and kind of give an opinion when you were seeing something, especially with the Paul Hart thing? I mean, did you want to say, this is a bit unfair on this guy, or something like that?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I'm really happy observing stuff, and my opinion counted for nothing, and quite rightly so. You know, I mean, I was very happy just to sort of let the camera roll. I'll sit behind it, and then you know, we'll digest it all in the edit. Yeah. Come another time. I mean, I'm not going to start telling these guys anything. You know, I'm not going to start producing them. I'm not going to tell them I want this to be shot this way or that. You know, everything was very natural in that sense, and my job was purely just to sort of be the fly on the wall.
Nice. Johnny Sykes via email. The soundtrack was great. How closely did you work with Rob Lord on the music? How much say did you have on the soundtrack? And how did you connect with him?
Well, there's two soundtracks to the movie actually. There's a commercial soundtrack, and then there's a non-commercial soundtrack which we put on the BBC. Mm-hmm. So we chose bands that we really liked, and I got to say credit to the editor again, Wes, because he was the one who was immersing himself in all sorts of music to find the perfect tracks. And you know, like we found bands like Junip and like the Black Angels, Black Keys, Tame Impala, and when it came to the BBC version, we just found that we couldn't afford to license it for that. So we knew we were going to have to do a slightly different version anyway for the BBC. So it made sense at that juncture to get Rob involved, who we'd met and really liked Rob and his work. And he said, I love your film, I want to rescore it for the BBC version. And we worked closely with him, but I've got to say he was pretty spot on with his first few passes, so we were really fortunate in that sense. And yeah, I definitely want to work with Rob again, whichever project that might be for coming up.
It's always a good endorsement.
Yeah,
Always a good
I
endorsement.
definitely would work with him
Repeat
again.
business keeps everyone in business.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
If you had the chance to do a documentary on another team, who would it be? Because I know the G-Man asked about a player, but if you were to do it on another team,
Well,
there's a Liverpool one coming up.
There is, yeah.
There's actually a Liverpool one coming
Yeah,
up, which
there
I'm
is.
going to be very interested to see how that
Yeah.
goes, being a Liverpool fan. But who would you pick if you were to do another team?
Well, I'd probably like to do an international team. I think following an international team at a tournament, for example, would be quite an interesting concept. That's really alien to us.
Yeah.
And I think that would be interesting. Probably never happen.
But who would you pick?
But who would it be?
Yeah, who would you pick?
Cool. I quite like the underdogs, so maybe, you know, like a Cool Runnings equivalent in the World Cup. So you follow Angola or someone like that. That'd be kind of cool.
It would have been pretty good if to follow. I think it was Ghana in 2006.
Yeah, there you go. That'd be a great example. They did really well.
That might have been interesting. I mean, the tactical naivety got exposed by Brazil.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you're playing a high.
But you expect
you're playing a high defensive line. Yeah, that's really smart.
Yeah.
But you kind of see that. But I just want to know who would you pick? Who would you pick? I mean, would you go for the romantic Spain story? Would you go for Holland?
I like the kind of. I think it's boring just to see sort of winning. I grew up on Sheffield Wednesday. I'm bound to say that. But I think that sort of slight level below, where they're looking up and they're trying to attain, you know, up and an improvement in that sense. I've always found that an interesting level in sport. Because there's room for improvement, basically. So yeah, it would have to be an international team. Well, probably England then, in that sense, isn't it? That's never going to happen.
The chronic
well.
underachievers.
No, I mean, I think you could follow. You know, you could follow all sorts of teams at that level, like a Republic of Ireland, for example. There's all sorts of them, but that would be the level I would find it interesting. Because it would be a little bit more like QPR. It's a bit lo-fi. You know, in that sense, and I think that you could find a sort of international team in that sense. Yeah. That or LA Galaxy.
Just because you get flown out.
You got it. You got it.
Hey, I love it. I just want an all expenses paid trip to LA. Is that too much to ask? Is a documentary maker? Is that too much to ask? David, yes, Mr. Beckham. Some people were fighting your corner in terms of Team GB, so you might want to.
Well, that would be quite interesting. Filming Team GB.
You reckon?
I think so. Yeah. Well, it would have been had they had more nations involved.
Yeah.
And not Stuart Pearce in charge, and David Beckham there. So now it's not interesting.
I mean, would you have been tempted to follow Holland or even France? Because you look at those two as nations. I mean, Holland ended up rock bottom of the group, no points. Considering a lot of people were tipping them to win the tournament. Do you think that would have made an interesting documentary, or do you think France would have made an interesting one in 2010 with their upheaval?
I don't know. Do you want to see people just being mardy all the time? That's what you get with the Dutch and the French, isn't it? At the moment, they're just sort of being a bit miserable. So I don't know if I could watch that for 90 minutes. But no, I mean, like I say, I'd go for more nation with a bit more character. That we've got a bit more of an underdog side to them, I think. Yeah.
Maybe Ivory Coast. Maybe Ivory Coast next one.
Well, there you go. They've got a chance.
I'd be interested. Why if they haven't got a Drogba?
They've still got a chance.
Future and Ad Hoc Films. What is the mantra or mission statement of Ad Hoc Films?
Like I said earlier, like we try and bring a sort of strong narrative, documentary narrative to our work, but increasingly what we've understood our mantra to be is more about the access. So understanding where we can get access in order to make our documentary. You might have the best doco in the world. You might even have funding for something, but if you don't get your access, you don't get your story, and then you don't get your product. So that's obviously something we learned incredibly with the 4-year plan, and as something that we apply to, you know, the future things that we're trying to or are doing at the moment.
Is there a 4-year plan for Ad Hoc Films? I had to.
I just finished the last 4-year plan. Come on. We have goals and visions. I don't think we would sort of hem it in that way. You know, to say this is what we've got to do in 4 years, 5 years. But we certainly have goals and ambitions as a company, and individually, you know, and collectively as directors and producers, etc. If we're still around in 4 years, I'd be happy, to be honest. So,
I think we will.
no, I mean, you know, we want all you can hope for is a much stronger portfolio in 4 years' time. You know, and a body of work that, you know, is still growing and that you're really, really pleased and proud of. So that's basically where we continue to sort of push ourselves, isn't it?
What is your favourite kind of documentary to make and also to watch? Because sometimes they can be a bit different. But
yeah, I mean that's quite difficult, isn't it? Because there are a lot of good documentaries, and some will be in a different genre to another genre. You know, like I was saying earlier, I am interested in kind of people and the different sort of people there are around the world, and different societies and groups and collectives and movements, etc. So films that reflect that interest me. But I do love sport documentaries, and I think we've been lucky recently with some great sport documentaries, such as Yusena's, etc. Going back, you know, it was Hoop Dreams. I thought was well. I think Hoop Dreams is actually a real inspiration for this film for me, because it was filmed over a long period of time. They didn't know how it was going to end. There's you know, some lines of that I'd like to think were similar with this film, and it was risk-taking filmmaking as well. Hoop Dreams, and it wasn't just a film about basketball. There was so much sort of social commentary in that film as well, and it was you could see it was such a labour of love, that film, for those guys that made it. So
I mean, even the kid himself. I mean, him waking up at like 5 and wanted to travel for 2-3 hours. To get to a good school so that he could get onto the basketball scholarship and that. The
long-termness of everything. I like things that are filmed over a long period, obviously. But I really do, because I like that sort of... I think, you know, like if you're going to tell a story and you're going to try and film it over a short space of time, it doesn't give a true reflection. I think if I was to say to you, what's the story of your life in the last 30 days or something, you probably wouldn't be able to give me an answer. But if I was to say, what's the story of your life over the last year or two, you'd give me a much more fully formed perspective, wouldn't you? And I think that documentary rarely goes over a long period of time, but actually it makes sense for it to, if you want a really fuller story of whatever you might be filming.
Are you a fan of it? So are you kind of a fan of books and kind of autobiographies and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I do like that. Yeah, that's interesting you say, actually, because I probably read more autobiographies and biographies than I do any other form of book, to be honest. Yeah,
because I prefer autobiographies just because it gets into the person. Because I've read Gerard's one, Carragher's one, reading John Motson's at the moment, which is actually quite a good read. Malcolm X's one, among others. Ian Wright's one was actually really entertaining too. So, in terms of documentaries that you like to watch, is there a particular favourite genre that you enjoy watching?
Well, no, like I say, a sort of, you know, I think if there's a good story, it's an interesting story, then. You know, I'll enjoy a documentary, but sometimes documentaries open your eyes to, you know, you could say, oh, I like this sort of documentary, but that means that you're cutting out all these kinds of interesting stories, and some things shouldn't be pigeonholed as a documentary like this or about, you know, that sort of thing, or, you know. So, you know, you can have all sorts of different types of documentary. And what I learned actually touring this film about documentary was interesting. When you go to different film festivals and documentary film festivals, is seeing just the kind of different things stories that people have found, and the ways in which they found them. And there's some amazing stories and amazing documentaries and amazing documentary makers out there, to be honest. the devotion and dedication to getting that story finished is extraordinary. And you know, I think it would be sort of foolhardy to sort of say I only like this sort of thing or I only like that sort of thing.
You spoke about film festivals. I'm going to jump on a couple of questions because Johnny Sykes via email asked, what was it like winning the Marbella International Film Festival, the Best Documentary Film Award? What was it like winning it?
It was cool. I mean, yeah, it was kind of like, it's not the Oscars, is it? But it was nice. You know? It was a great night. If you're going to go into competition, and we were there, so that was the other thing about it, was it was nice to sort of, because we didn't go to every single festival this film entered, but we wanted to go to that one, and we had friends out there at the time as well, so we sort of combined it with a bit of a sort of trip, you know, with mates. And they all came to the dinner ceremony, so that was the best thing about it. It was like, you got all your mates around, and it was like, you know, it's very un-film festival etiquette when our name got read out, because, you know, this kind of like rugby style roar went up. You know, I'll tell you, I was like, yeah, simmer down. It was a really cool feeling, to be honest. And you know, I'm sure that the sort of humble PC thing to say is, you know, awards are just an extra thing, that you don't do it for awards. Of course, you don't do what you do for an awards, but it's a really, really lovely sort of validating feeling as well when you do win an award, you know.
Well, you turned up to a premiere in a sling. The G-Man was one of the people who brought that to my attention. There's an interesting story behind that, isn't there?
Yeah, probably like about a week and a half before the busiest week of my life, I went to Las Vegas on a stag do, and I was the best man, and we had a great time. But on the last night, I felt like the whole group was sort of flagging a bit, and I felt it was my responsibility to raise the game again. So I got a lot of Patron on the go. So the tequila came out, and I found that most of them didn't really want to drink it, so I ended up drinking a lot of it myself.
Oh my word.
And then, which is fine, but tequila sort of makes me a bit kind of manic, and then I found myself on a podium dancing, and I can't believe I'm telling this story. And then I was all right, I had my balance fine. What the problem was there were some people dancing around me, and there was this kind of like quite large American woman sort of getting a bit too close.
It's a bit natural, isn't it?
Yeah, and she sort of lost her balance, and I went, and I landed, I put my hand down and caught myself, obviously, and it was fine.
Yeah.
Until I felt the weight of this American woman fall on top of me, and then feel my wrist snap.
Ooh.
And yeah, it kind of went badly in both areas. So obviously hospital straight away, and then I had to stay in Vegas for a few nights. And then I came back, and it was that week that we had the premiere of the 4-year play. We had sort of like a London premiere where all the QPR players and staff and board and loads of press came. It was an amazing night. It was like, you know, one of those dream nights, you know, for me, except I was kind of drugged up to the eyeballs with painkillers and in a sling, so I had to introduce I had to sort of introduce my film in a sling, which was a bit of a hindrance. And then the week after that we were on BBC as well, so it was a really busy time. And if you've ever broken your wrist, you don't sleep, so it's quite hard to remain lucid and sort of sharp.
I've had knee surgery.
Yeah, you know what I mean, you just don't sleep at all, so it was a testing time, but you know, Vegas does that to you, maybe.
Worth it?
You can't regret these things, can you? You know,
living regret. You'll be living bored. So
yeah,
nah, it's all good. Do you prefer doing documentaries or commercials, and why?
I think sort of in my heart I prefer documentary, but I do enjoy doing commercials, and it's good to do something short and sharp sometimes. Commercial projects generally tend to be shorter as a project, and it's quite intense as a consequence, and that also brings with it, you know, sort of a weird sense of enjoyment, I always find.
Yeah.
Whereas the documentaries are stretched over a longer period, and you've got to just keep a controlling eye over that and sort of have the bigger vision, whereas the commercials, I enjoy that sort of short-termness of it. So I actually think that both feed into each other as well. I think that you have skills that you pick up and learn and hone when you do short form that come in quite handy when you do long form, and vice versa as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to have the duality there.
In terms of projects in the pipeline for Ad Hoc,
Yeah.
what else have you got in terms of future projects that you can divulge?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because the next really big project is still, sort of with investors and trying to get there. I've got the access pretty much, but it's just trying to find the funding for it. And, I'm hopeful on that front. But that's kind of the hardest part about filmmaking, is getting the money in, But we've got everything else in place for that. And if I can get the funding, then that is just going to blow the 4-year plan out of the water. It's much bigger, much more exciting, and it's an epic story. But I need the money. In the meantime, we're finishing off a documentary we're doing about football in India. Okay. And it's called The Last Frontier, and why Indian football has not been broken as a market, both from a sort of club point of view, merchandise point of view, but also from a player's point of view as well. A sport mad nation of 1 billion people. So we just go and sort of explore that a little bit and try and understand why it is. And there was a couple of kids that came over actually to the UK and trained here. And we use them as a bit of a spine of it, because they're the sort of experiment from the other way, this way. So that's the jump off point. And we do quite a lot of charity films actually. We do a lot of NGO stuff, which is really, really good fun, and feels like you're doing something sort of positive as well. And a couple of other commercial stuff. We do the sort of bread and butter stuff is things like we do regular work for the likes of CNN and those kind of corporations as well. But I would say it's a difficult time at the moment for the film and the production industry, and budgets are sort of diminishing very quickly at the moment, and there's less money around for every industry, and ours is one that's been affected just like every other. And you just have to kind of suck it up and sort of roll with the punches on that, and try and find other ways of sort of getting things off the ground and finding funding for certain projects. And like I said earlier, there's always a way though, isn't there?
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Do you think on that subject, do you think the rise of user-generated content is a good thing or a bad thing for the video production industry?
Both. I think it's brilliant. I mean, I love the fact that anyone can go and film stuff, and people are sort of versed in video now. I think it's amazing. And you just think about if you had that when you were a kid, I remember I bought a video camera when I was very young, and I edited in the camera, and now the capabilities, with your phone and everything. So that's amazing, and I love that. I think it's brilliant, because the more people that go out there and film and, understand it, I think is only good for the industry, to be honest. My concern is that people might learn the wrong habits and might not learn the correct techniques and understanding about the other elements of filmmaking. It's okay to say I can edit something, but you have to understand why you're editing something and what you're trying to form, and have an editorial understanding of something. So, there's sort of good things and bad things. But I think generally it's a good thing, though, I've got to say. It's one thing that if you're kind of smart and you watch a lot of things and you understand what you're watching and why things are done, then you can probably enhance your skills very quickly now.
Nice one.
But it's more competition for us, isn't it? So.
Very much so. It's like, competition helps you raise your game, but at the same time,
it's all good. It's all good.
Any last words of wisdom?
I don't know if I'm in a position to give words of wisdom. I would just say the one thing about what I do is that I really, really enjoy what I do, and I think that when you really enjoy what you do, that really does resonate through. You have a passion for something, and it makes you better at what you do. So you know, as far as sort of making films go, you know, I'll always love doing that. You know, whether it's, you know, something that's becomes high profile or whether it's something that doesn't, I will always enjoy that. So that's kind of like the main thing from my perspective.
Nice. So that was Matt. You've been a scholar and a gentleman.
Nice to meet you, Liam.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, remember, it is we the people for the people, because the pitch is where we eat, the pitch is where we sleep, and the pitch is where we talk. We'll see you next time on Pitch Talk Meets.